This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios Podcast Network. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on the Apple Podcast Store, rate the podcast on Spotify, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening. We have a merch store on TeePublic. You can get all of your Graceful Atheist and Secular Grace themed items there. The link will be in the show notes. If you're in the middle of doubt, deconstruction, the dark night of the soul, you do not have to do it alone. Join our private Facebook group, Deconversion Anonymous, and become a part of the community. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's show. On to today's show. Arlene interviews our guest, Andrew. Andrew describes himself as an atheist paleo nerd. That comes out in his website, Dino Dad Reviews, and you can also find him all across social media under the moniker Dino Dad Reviews. Andrew grew up in a fundamentalist environment that held to young Earth creationism, which is very difficult if you're a bright young person with an interest in paleontology. As an introvert, it was difficult with the expectations for evangelism and various other things. And now he reviews books about paleontology for children and adults. And you can again find him at Dino Dad Reviews. Here is Arlene interviewing Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Hey, good to be here.
So you and I connected shortly after the Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group started, and I count you among my friends, so I'm really excited because I talk to you on the regular, and now I get to hear your full story.
Yeah, I'm excited for this as well, for the same reasons. It's been great chatting with you and everybody else.
Yes, I have built some really good friendships in the group and gotten to meet some people in real life. Just a few, but it's been really nice. So we usually begin. Tell us about the religious environment that you grew up in.
Okay, well, I grew up in a pretty strong religious background. I feel like I kind of have to pull all these different threads together a little bit because I don't know, there very much is this kind of family tradition. On my dad's side, my grandpa was one of the founding members of the church I grew up in. And on my mom's side, we have this big extended family that's still relatively close despite its size. And lots of them are missionaries and things like that. And we always took everything fairly seriously. Yeah, I grew up going to Sunday school every Sunday, and we often did the whole Wednesday night thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we grew up in Southern California, so there's only so conservative you can go there, I feel like. But for Southern California, it was pretty fundamentalist, conservative, and all that.
What kind of church was it? Like what denomination?
It was a independent, non-denominational church, but all of those tend to be vaguely Baptist in their beliefs. So
That's true. I found in the few places we've lived, there'll be the big mega church-looking church in town, but they're Baptist. They just don't have it in their name. They're part of the SBC usually.
Yeah, and actually, our church did technically fall into the megachurch category. We had maybe about 1,000 members, and the worship center had space for even more, but I think they got a little overly optimistic when they built it because it was never super full. But they had a very robust kids program. I still have fond memories of growing up in that. Most of my friends were actually through church group and stuff like that because I was actually homeschooled growing up.
Okay.
Well, education, I think, is another aspect of my religious background, too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure there were academic reasons, like, purely academic reasons, as far as like general test scores and things like that my parents decided to homeschool me. But we were also a little bit of the be apart from the world sort of mentality.
Yeah.
Not in an extreme way, because we would still watch movies if there wasn't too much swearing and stuff like that. But there was definitely that suspicion of secular education and stuff like that.
So I imagine your curricula, that was all Christian?
Mm-hmm.
All the stuff?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And each of my siblings tried out homeschooling for a year, but then they all ended up going to the private school that my church actually ran instead.
Oh, wow.
I'm the oldest in the family, and then
I was going to ask, where are you in the lineup?
Yeah. My second brother, I think my parents decided that a more traditional environment would just genuinely be best for him.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time my second two siblings were getting into schoolwork, I think it may have been more just my parents didn't necessarily feel like doing that at that point. And so they got sent to the same school as well. But by then, I was relatively self-sufficient, and my mom could just plop me in front of an assignment sheet and I'd power through it and get it done usually by noon, and then I would just hang out and read or watch TV or things like that. Even though all my siblings started a traditional school around first or second grade, I was homeschooled K through 8.
Oh, okay.
And
wow.
So just kind of in my own little bubble there.
Yeah. Now, were you a part of co-ops, sports teams, any kind of math club, any kind of thing?
Yeah, my mom always had me on the swim team, and we got our homeschooling curriculum through this sort of a co-op thing. They didn't really do classes except for like specialists or like special art events where you could come and do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
They would do the organized standardized testing and report our grades to the government and do all the paperwork stuff so that we wouldn't have to. And they also organized field trips and stuff like that. So
okay.
I knew a few kids through that, but it wasn't any sort of regular interaction. So all my friends were through my youth group, basically, at least in my early childhood anyway.
So then high school youth group, college youth group, or not youth group, I guess young adult. Are you still involved then? Or?
Yeah. High school was quite a shift, but...
Oh, because you went K through 8th, and then were you just dropped into a school?
Jumped into public school, not even like a private Christian one or anything. So
oh, wow.
I was definitely nervous about that.
I bet. How was that?
Adjusted better than I would have expected, and I think a big part of it was finding one of my friends from youth group there.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, his name was Tyler, and I just kind of latched onto him for dear life. And, yeah, he was kind of my lifeline to getting plugged in there, and most of my high school friends I met through him. But yeah, I was still very involved in youth group at church and started doing the various summer camps and even a couple mission trips, although I was never super into that. I felt like I should be doing things like that, and there was this sense that the best Christians would become missionaries, But I could never get myself to get in other people's faces. And not just to the witnessing part too, but for a lot of these trips, they wanted you to like get friends and family to pay for
Yes.
whatever expenses you incurred, whether it was just like weekend lodgings or for some of the bigger ones, travel expenses. I say travel expenses, but it was like, driving the church van a few states over or something like that usually. But, I couldn't even handle that part really. I was just like, why am I bothering these people for this?
Yes, I hated that part of things because my family were mostly nominal Christians, and so they didn't care if the church was doing a mission trip, and they didn't want to give money to something they didn't care about. And it's just awkward to like be a kid and have to ask a bunch of grown-ups from like that's a weird experience right there.
Yeah. Although in my family, we were always very supportive of missionaries, obviously, because I have first, second, third cousins who are in the field even now. So there was this strong family identity that was kind of tied to all that.
Oh, wow. So, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So my hesitance was also very much a point of shame for me too. I was, because that was more just kind of my personality getting in the way, or so I thought, and I've always kind of been shy and hesitant to do anything that makes me feel like I'm forcing myself upon other people,
I can understand that. And the church doesn't, maybe today it's different, I don't know, but when we were young, like the church values the very outgoing, the very go-get-em, the in people's face. And those of us who are like, could we just have like a one-on-one conversation that we've already planned and everyone is on board and everyone's consented? Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, that disconnect between my personality and at least the perceived expectations of the church and everything that goes with it was kind of a major source of, well, it was always emotionally uncomfortable for most of my life, but it got pretty unhealthy as time went on, especially in high school and college. I'm very much aware that I'm, just a very middle-class white boy, and I don't have the biggest problems in the world, but, the church does kind of build up these expectations that you be not like important, but that you're going to go on and do great things for God. And
yes.
And for me, like, not only am I not living up to that, but it feels like it's, it's not just happenstance that I'm not living up to it, but like my personality isn't like a good match for that. And so I began pathologizing parts of myself that were just normal. And then, once you throw purity culture into that as well, then that becomes a whole thing. I was in high school, like around when all that was kind of at its peak. And so, again, as a male, I definitely didn't get it as bad as maybe the girls did, but, the don't look at porn, don't masturbate message was very thoroughly hammered in. Like in high school, we were like reading these little self-help books about, avoiding lust and temptation and all that. Yeah, I very much absorbed that messaging. And all this kind of came to a head in college, which started off pretty well. I was excited and whatnot in my freshman year. The excitement of being in a new place and feeling like things are moving forward sustained me for a little while, but as time went on, the negative groundwork that had already been laid started rearing up again. And I went to the campus therapy. I went to the campus therapist at one point, and after talking for several weeks with them, I more or less got the diagnosis that I was suffering from depression, and that I had actually had those tendencies for most of my life, most likely.
Had your family had any... My dad was never a Christian, so he had the vocabulary, like the psychology vocabulary of depression or anxiety, things like that. But I became a Christian as an adult, and we never had that vocabulary. Did your family have any of that vocabulary as far as...
A little bit, because there's seems to be this general acknowledgement that it's kind of a family illness on my mom's side.
Okay.
At least a few of the people in that group that I've talked to. It seems to have been something that my great grandpa dealt with, and as well as my grandma.
Okay.
And I actually had an aunt who ended her own life in college due to depression at one point. And that was before I was born even. Yeah. So there's this general awareness of it, but it's not really talked about much. So I never really got much education on it, I guess you could say.
I understand. So, like, what did you do with that information when you found out that it was possible you had depression?
Well, I briefly tried medication, but I did not establish a proper support network or anything. Yeah. And so when I was frustrated that it didn't seem to be working, I just kind of quit. And I think I'd only even tried it for like a week or something at that point. So if I had had the proper, ongoing evaluation, then I don't know, maybe I should have stayed on that, but there wasn't really any ongoing discussion that I was having about it. And so I mostly just kind of fell back on the general Christianese as my way of coping with it. Just just trust God harder and pray more, and maybe he'll take it away. And, even seeing it as like a selfish disease, oh, you're so focused on yourself.
Yes.
Why don't you just think about God more? And yeah. So that kind of spiraled. And by the end of junior year and all throughout my senior year of high school, I was in a very deep depression. And I was trying to rely more and more on God to fix it. But just to no avail. I literally every Sunday ended with me hiding in the back of the worship center, crying in the corner, just in tears, praying for anything, really. Sometimes I would be praying to make the depression go away. Sometimes I would be praying just, oh, I'm just a terrible, selfish person anyway, so just hollow me out and make me a puppet and just at least make me worth something, but yeah, that was a major blow to me. I felt like it kind of derailed everything, but then kind of also forced me to confront the fact that I wasn't necessarily going much of anywhere in the first place. Because I feel like I'd sort of been doing this Christian sleepwalk for my teenage and young adult life, where I was just like, well, I'm trying to follow God, and the chips will fall where they may, and it'll just work out. I'm sure he has a plan or something.
Okay.
And so I began to realize I didn't really do the work that I should have to figure out where I went to college or what I wanted to do with my life. Because, that suspicion my family had for secular education I absorbed that, and I never took any secular college as a serious option. And so really only ever seriously considered about 5 Christian schools and only even applied to 2 of them. The one that I did, which was Biola University, I honestly selected that one because they had found a woolly mammoth skeleton on campus while building one of the dorms.
Oh, fun fact.
They had, they had a program that was closest to my interests, which was also involved in excavating that mammoth, because Biola happens to be one of the 2 Christian colleges that has a very robust anthropology program, which includes archaeology. I had always been interested in paleontology, and if you had asked me as I was going into college, that's what I wanted to do, really. But, I didn't want to go to one of those secular schools where they actually offered that course. So I figured archaeology, especially if they were practicing their field methods on the mammoth skeleton, was the next best thing. So I did that. And I thought, maybe if I get myself a solid Christian base, I'll be a strong enough Christian that I can go to a secular school later. But again, I just kind of got swept up by that sense of, it didn't even have much of a sense of purpose, but I figured there must be purpose somewhere that was going to work itself out. So I didn't really think about where I was going too hard. But anyway, as I was in the depths of my depression, and I did at least still continue going to the campus therapist off and on. And, at one point kind of realized the situation I had gotten myself into, and, my grades were suffering and everything. And so, I don't know, basically, long story short, I feel like I kind of only technically graduated, as I put it sometimes, because I have a degree and everything, but it's not really in something that I actually had that much interest in doing. And I struggled so much the last couple of years when, all the serious classes were being taught, that I feel like I didn't even necessarily get the full benefit of the degree that I do have. So, now here I am, graduated with not really much to show for it. And so I kind of spent the next year, feeling kind of emotionally post-apocalyptic, just kind of sitting around and not getting much done. Oftentimes my friends would call wanting to hang out, and I would just let it go to voicemail, and I just kind of became a little bit of a recluse for a bit. I did actually somehow meet and fall in love with and mutually attract my wife to be at this point as well. Not entirely sure what she saw in me through all this, but we met in college and started dating, and eventually I did get just kind of a basic 9-to-5 sort of job. So I was starting to save up money along with her, and we got married about a year after that. Or no, a year after she graduated, because I was on a 4-year track and she was on a 5-year track. So it was at this point that I was starting to realize that my religious assumptions weren't getting me much of anywhere, and that it was, in fact, well, sometimes secular solutions and sometimes just, letting go and not having anything to do with it in general. That was the real solution.
Not having anything to do with like Christianity in general, or
yeah, because while the job that I got wasn't anything to do with my degree, working did give me some sense of at least I'm competent enough to hold down a job. And obviously getting married to my wife was a big emotional boost as well. And so, I was just kind of struck by the fact that, through all these years of praying and begging and all that, I never got any mystical sense of healing or never really felt the presence of God or anything like that. But then just doing these very mundane, normal things helped me feel much better than any of that ever did. And so not long after that, not only did I, kind of make a conscious decision to stop praying for myself, having found that being married didn't necessarily cure what I would have considered lust, I also made the decision to just stop beating myself up over that and, not worrying about it anymore. I was realizing that praying for healing from my depression wasn't working, and I was still experiencing what I would consider lustful thoughts despite now being married. And so clearly prayer wasn't helping, and my religious assumptions were getting me nowhere. So I made the conscious decision to stop praying around then. And I also basically gave myself free rein to just not control my sexual thoughts or anything like that. And once you know it, both of those things suddenly got better.
Yes. No.
Because I wasn't constantly, in one sense they didn't get better because my depression, all things being equal, was still at a roughly equivalent level to what it had been. But I wasn't constantly praying for it to be taken away. And so all that time that I would be praying and thinking about it, had the potential to be something else. So if nothing else, that was one less occasion on which I was thinking about my depression. And so, thinking about it just always would spiral into actually, getting into a depressive funk. And so, when I stopped praying, that happened that much less often. And so I was generally in a better mood then. And then when I stopped concerning myself about porn or anything like that, suddenly, now that maybe it's as simple as just now that the forbidden part of it wasn't there, suddenly it was less interesting. And so now I was doing that less too.
No, both of those things, I had a similar experience when I decided mine. I never was formally diagnosed, so I don't know, but there was like what they call mom rage, where it was like, I was so angry and mean. Like it was a whole scary thing for my kid. Like it was really bad. And I just kept, you're praying about it. You're asking like, God, please help me. Like you're supposed to be, you wouldn't use the word magical, but like you're supposed to have power to like help fix these things.
Mhm.
And when I did a similar, I consciously was like, I'm not going to pray about this anymore. All it does is stress me out because I don't know if God's going to help or not. So I have more anxiety about the thing. And it was like my brain cleared up in a way that I didn't know my brain could clear up. It wasn't perfect, but
Yeah.
it took away that extra layer of anxiety. And then my husband and he deconverted first, and I went on my own journey. And one night we were talking about pornography, and it was like,
Mhm.
because we're taught that it's all inherently bad, it's all evil, it's exploitation, it's lust, it's this, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't know what I think about it.
Mhm.
I don't know. But when it became for him, when I was like, well, if we decide to watch something, okay, like we'll be okay, that's fine. This will be like a thing that we can try and see. For him, because he had the more compulsive, like wanted to watch it, he was like, it became less interesting
Uh-huh.
because now it's a possibility. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And it was, yeah, that
Uh-huh.
it being the forbidden fruit, I like the way you said that, made it way more interesting when it was like, oh, this is just like a piece of candy I can have if I want it. Okay. Then it's just like in the pantry and you don't even think about it.
And also, there's the whole like, don't think about porn, don't think about porn, don't think about porn. Oh,
Yes.
but I'm thinking about it by telling myself not to
Yes.
think about it. It's just these knots that it ties you into.
Yes. And when Jesus said, like, your thought life is evil and sinful and bad and like all that, it's just like,
Yeah.
I have nothing but, we have some bizarre thoughts that go through our minds. And it's like, if that means it's reality or that means that it's true, then I am a horrible person. And it's, oh my heavens. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Continue.
Yeah. But yeah, you'd think that this might be where the deconversion happens, but I
Yeah.
still tried to make it work in some fashion or another for the next few years. It was around this time that I also realized what a bogus conspiracy theory that creationism was,
Oh, okay.
and began to accept evolution. And I also found a group of theistic evolutionists, as awkward as that sounds to say, on Facebook. And that's actually where I met a mutual friend of you and me, Lars Cade. And
Yay.
so we slowly became friends through that. But I think accepting evolution actually briefly saved my
Oh, that's
Christianity
interesting.
for a time. Yeah, yeah. Because some of the things I was starting to notice in the Bible, like, God ordering the genocide of the Canaanites and stuff like that, I was starting to get the cognitive
Mm-hmm.
dissonance about all that. And so once I accepted evolution, I was like, well, either the Bible itself evolves, or if we want to take it somewhat literally, maybe God himself was just trying to do a selective breeding program on people and trying to make us more spiritual or something like that.
Wow.
But that was an interesting intellectual period in my
Yes.
life.
Trying
But
to make all that work. Ooh.
mhm. But one of the funny results of that was that I told myself I didn't want to give Ken Ham the satisfaction of being correct in that evolution leads to atheism. So I was like, well, whatever else happens, I'm still going to be a Christian. So I honestly think that's kind of what sustained me for the next
That's
few
fun. You
years.
should write Ken Ham and let him know, hey, there for a little while, I stayed a Christian because I wanted to prove you wrong. But, things change. But I did want to let you know you had that time period of my life.
Yeah.
So you said the cognitive dissonance, evolution, you're fine with evolution, it's trying to make it work.
Mm-hmm. But the cognitive dissonance still kept growing, and despite the distance I had put between myself and God for my own mental health, that still wore on me a bit. because, yeah, like you're saying, if there's such a thing as thought crimes in Christianity, then, there truly can be nobody righteous, which, Jesus is supposed to save us from. But it's also supposed to essentially be your thoughts that save you, because you're supposed to say in your heart, like, oh, I accept you and I'll follow you.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's where the belief is and all that. Huh. Yeah, I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, yeah. But, if the heart of man is wicked
Right.
above all things and I can't trust my own thoughts and my own reason, then how can I be sure that I was, serious when I became a Christian? And how do I know that, each little thought crime isn't just proof that I'm not really a Christian? And
Yeah, it can spiral so fast if you think about it.
yeah. And I think that whole thing, that was the final bit of rot that really ate away at the remains of my faith. Because I just couldn't accept that I couldn't be secure in my faith. I don't know that I was necessarily seeing the deconversion stories that were coming out around then, but I just had this. I still already knew the general Christian response of, well, they were never really real Christians anyway. Like, I still had that in the back of my head. And so I was like, well, if you can have somebody that seems so Christian that's never really was one anyway, then there's no reason to think that I ever was one. So despite everything that I've done to try to appeal to God and everything, and so if all these little thought crimes are potentially enough to indicate that I never really was a real Christian, well, I'm might as well be damned for stealing a chicken as an egg, and and so if being in the church, there's a possibility that I'm not a real Christian, then why continue? And I think the final nail in the coffin was me discovering atheist YouTube and finally having a lot of the words for all these things that I was feeling.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I was actually introduced to that through RN Ra attending TetsuCon in 2018. So this is a whole thing that goes down my nerdier side. So I had been involved in online paleontology nerd circles for a long time now. Mm-hmm. And I had already started making a few friends through there. There's this one paleontologist in particular that I follow named Darren Naish, who has a blog and a podcast called Tetrapod Zoology, where he talks not just about paleontology, but any vertebrate animals, living or dead. And so he's actually amassed quite a following, and you could make the case that a significant amount of on the online paleontology world kind of revolves around him to a certain extent. Like he's kind of he's kind of become a bit of a hub that a lot of people can relate to. And so he actually felt that he had enough of a following that he could do his own little convention around his blog. Yeah. And so this year will actually be the 10th anniversary of that.
Wow.
But anyway, at the 2018 one, RN Ra was one of the speakers there, and he was presenting on his phylogeny project that he's doing. Phylogeny being the fancy scientific term for just the evolutionary family tree.
Okay, I was going to ask. Not everyone would have any, including myself, knows what that word means. I have no idea. Okay, now we know.
And so I started watching his YouTube series on that project. But then, of course, I also was seeing his other videos on atheist content. And then now that he was in my feed, YouTube began recommending all the other people to me as well. And I think it was particularly finding Pelagia.
Okay, yeah.
That was a big turning point for me because he was in a vaguely similar position to myself. Well, I mean, other than all the specific details about his life being completely different, but but it had a similar religious upbringing, similarly believed in creationism at one point, and was now an atheist. But he was very much the opposite of the caricature of the angry atheist that had kind of dominated YouTube up until then. And so I think particularly seeing this more thoughtful community that had developed also gave me the space to be more comfortable with adopting that label. And so I don't know that there was a specific moment that I decided I had deconverted, but, you know, essentially from about 2018 on, I've been more or less officially an atheist since then.
And so now, you know, we're told that there's no joy, happiness, purpose, meaning, any of those things whenever you leave Christianity. How do you find those things now? Now, I will say your face lit up as soon as you start. Y'all can't see it because we're on podcast, but as soon as you started talking about paleontology, it was like a whole new Andrew. It was about the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But so, yeah, how do you find meaning and purpose and all the things we were told we can't have?
Well, I've been throwing myself into the paleo world much more thoroughly than I ever had been before. I actually started my own little blog called Dino Dad Reviews.
Yes, it's fantastic. Great children's books available on there if you're interested. Yes.
So yeah, I mostly review children's books on paleontology, although I do the odd book aimed at adults every so often, and occasionally TV shows and museums as well. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun with that, and I've gotten more connected with people in the paleosphere, as we call it, through that.
I love it so much.
Yeah. I've been having lots of fun with that. It's been great. I do miss the idea of church in some ways because I have yet to find a strong real life replacement for it. I've got these great online communities with you and our friends in the Deconversion Anonymous group and all my friends in the paleosphere. But, you know, if you're just to look at me going about my daily life, I very much look like a bit of a recluse.
Yeah.
And through both my depression and purity culture and all that, I've definitely suppressed this over time, but I do think I am sort of I think physical touch and or just physical presence, I think, is one of my love languages. And so I have felt kind of stunted in that regard for the last few years. And I even still have been going with my family to church. Because of that. Just kind of in the hopes that I could still connect with some kind of community, but that hasn't really been working out very well. There's a couple people that I like that I see sometimes, but, you know, church still hasn't really felt like a community since I left youth group.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's like this strange experience when becoming an adult, all of a sudden, everything's so much harder to build friendships in real life. And I don't know like I've seen memes that are like, I'll wear a t-shirt that says, I would like to be your friend, you know, to the park for play dates. Like, are any of the other moms or dads want to be it's strange. I don't have the answers or know why it gets weird, but
yeah. I mean, I also have my own internal issues that don't help me in that regard.
Nope, I understand.
Like I said, I have a very strong aversion to doing anything that feels like I'm forcing myself on other people. And so I think in some ways that's possibly why I have more online friends than real life friends at the moment, because to me, it feels like an online friend always has much more of a chance to back out if they want to.
Oh, that's interesting.
But when you're like face to face with someone and talking to them, it's harder to politely get away from that. So I think I just kind of have a bit of social anxiety in that regard, I guess.
Yeah. And like with online friends, at least what I found is, well, I hope there's this freedom, because I've been living in this freedom. So I hope it actually exists, of like not having to get back soon every single time. Like there's this amount of distance where it's like, if I don't have whatever energy I need to like chat right now, it's okay. Like I'll get back when I can. But then there's also this, like, I don't know, it feels like there's more freedom to like, we'll chat and then we can have space, and then we can chat and have space. And which I say that you and I are in a group thread, and I am always late. Like I don't have a clue that's what's happening by the time I get to it. So I don't know if that's good or not good, having that space and taking it.
You also have the advantage of casting a wider net and having a greater chance of finding people that actually click well with you.
Yes. If I were bound by geography, I would have a lot fewer acquaintances and friends. And
same.
So here you are, a heathen, an atheist, a paleo nerd. I love it. What recommendations do you have for people who are deconverting or have already deconverted?
Well, I would definitely recommend Apologia, like I said before. That's Paul, like the name. Paullogia. So it's a pun on apologetics, which, funnily enough, apologists somehow never seem to catch, because
really? It seems so obvious.
I know, right? But literally every apologist response video to him I've ever seen, they're like, so there's this guy like Pelagia.
Wow.
It's a pun on your profession.
Yes. Oh, that's funny.
You have to be doing this on purpose.
Oh my gosh. We'll have it all in the show notes, so don't worry about how it's spelled. Like we'll have him in the show notes.
And anyway, but he's always super kind and gracious and everything. He's just a pleasure to listen to.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, I would almost say the YouTube algorithm can take you from there, because just the people that he associated with. But, I would also obviously recommend this podcast.
Yay.
Yeah, and like our Facebook group and other online communities like that. I also find that a strong non-religious community is also helpful as well. It's just good to have some sort of community of mutual interest that you're involved in that is not tied to the church or anything like that.
Yes.
For me, it was the online paleo community, and just being able to talk with joy about things that we love that are just there and don't have moral implications on our lives.
It's just something you love.
Yeah. And it's just a very healthy activity.
Yes.
And that's something you can't neglect in all this, because I think there can be a tendency to spiral in different ways once you come out of religion and take mentally unhealthy tracks. I think that's where the whole, early 2000s angry atheist YouTube culture came from. It's just these people who deconverted, but then never quite answered the now what,
Yeah. Like, what do we do now that isn't just being against something the whole time.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for doing this. This was such a lovely conversation. I really appreciate you being on.
Yeah, I was nervous that I wouldn't have anything interesting to talk about, but this was good. I like this.
My final thoughts on the episode. I've had a few other opportunities to interview people that I've become friends with online, but this was my first time with someone like that I talked to not every single day, but pretty close, very often. And so this just made my heart so happy, getting to talk to Andrew and hear his full story. Y'all, I wish this had been YouTube so you could see him light up. It was like a completely different person, like telling the beautiful but difficult story of his deconversion. And then when he started talking about his paleo nerd friends circle conference, it was just, he lit up. So I guess one of my big takeaways is, y'all, find that thing that lights you up, that makes you one of those things where you could just talk about it for hours, something you love so much that just makes your heart happy and makes you excited and makes you want to just tell the whole world about it. That's one of the things we're told in Christianity, is that this is the most important thing. Jesus is most important. You should care about this. But they just should all over us about something that may or may not be super interesting to us. And then they want us to tell the whole world about the thing that's not super interesting. And it just doesn't work. So y'all, find the things that just light you up, whether it's your family or paleontology or some other ology. Or for me, it's children's books and kids. The options are endless. We may not be able to make money off of it, but like we can love it and do it and enjoy it. So find those things. The Facebook group, like I've built some great friendships there. If possible, if you're interested, we will have links in the show notes. Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group. Come to some of the events. Come to the Tuesday night podcast discussions or our weekend social that's once a month. And y'all meet some people. They're fabulous. We're fabulous. Andrew, thank you again for being on the podcast. It was so lovely.
The Secular Grace thought of the week, inspired by Andrew, is accept your personality. There are many ways that you may not fit in church, but one of the difficult ones is being a precocious, intelligent kid who is an introvert growing up in the church. The expectations to be demonstrative, to be evangelistic, to be out front and in leadership in one way or another is absolutely a huge burden on such a person. I want to be clear here that there are lots of difficulties for kids who are outgoing and extroverted as well. So it's not just about introversion here. But the message that a child takes in is that there's something wrong with them because they are not matching up with the expectation. On this side of deconstruction and deconversion, you can accept your personality, who you are. You can lean into the strengths of your personality. If you're an introvert who likes to study and focus on details, or an extrovert who is a people person who brings people together and is a hub of community, whatever your thing is, you can lean into that and accept it. And whatever is a perceived weakness, there's no pressure anymore. No one's asking you to be something that you are not. You get to be yourself. Until next time, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. The beat is called Waves by Mackay Beats. If you want to get in touch with me to be a guest on the show, email me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com. For blog posts, quotes, recommendations, and full episode transcripts, head over to gracefulatheist.com. This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios podcast network.